Hey everybody, it's Keith with Bob CNC. Welcome to Shop Talk. And as always, I'm right next to my very best friend, Bob Wood.
Very best.
Very.
Well, I'm here with my best friend Keith H. I wasn't going to give you your whole name.
Why? You don't know it, do you? That's really some friend doesn't even know my last name. Yeah. Well, anyway, today we're going to continue on our discussion of how to design or how to build your own CNC.
Yep.
And we've covered a lot of stuff. We've talked everything about controllers, motors, drive systems.
Yep.
Yeah, more stuff than that.
Yeah, probably.
But we're going to talk about something that you absolutely don't need. I just found out you don't need it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you should have it. It's one of those ought to things.
Ought?
Yeah, you ought to have it.
That's a philosophical conception.
So what we're talking about is home switches. So the reason he's saying that you don't need them is because if you don't home them...
Because you told me we don't need them. Don't put it on me. Jeez.
Because if you don't home your machine's ready to go, you can just zero it and move it. The only reason that you have home switches or limit switches...
How do you home your machine without limit switches or home switches?
You don't. You just don't do it. But the reason that you home your machine is to set limits. But before we get there...
So I can just go to where I think home is and say 000.
You don't even have to go where home is. You go to where your work zero is.
Okay.
Just, after you home the machine, you move it around and you get it to the right position and you zero it there.
Okay.
So theoretically, skip home, go to the 0 point, zero, and just run your file.
That is your advice.
No, actually, we have home
You are
switches
contradictory.
I am, but if you would just let me talk, I would try to explain it.
Well, it's not making any sense.
Okay, well here, let me try to make sense. If you have home switches or limit switches, you think about all they do is tell the machine when it's reached its limit.
Yes.
Right? So if something bad happens and it reaches its limit, it will go, you got to stop, you've reached the limit. Right? If you don't have that, it will grind on the side of your machine. And if you have a big enough machine, i.e. an industrial machine, you will break stuff.
Yeah.
You can, and those get to be expensive. If you take a smaller hobby CNC and you don't have home switches, it will go over to the side and the stepper motors will, grind and you'll hear it and it sounds awful. It really doesn't hurt anything. It puts some maybe wear and tear on your machine, but it doesn't hurt anything. However, the nice thing about home switches, which we'll cover first, let's just, maybe we should talk about the difference between
limit switches
versus home switches,
Okay.
So a home switch, they're switches, right? Either one of them are switches, so they're common that way.
Yes.
It's just their function. So when you say a home switch, right, what happens is when you home the machine and put it up against each one of those switches, it does calculation in the firmware that says, okay, I'm here and I know I can go this far here, so therefore it knows the limits of your machine.
Right.
Limit switches are set up to where they're always active in the system, and if they get bumped, it says, hey, you've bumped, I've hit a limit. So the one switch, the home switch, is only active during the homing process, and the rest of the time you can push them, squeeze them, unplug them, whatever, doesn't matter. They're not while the G-code file's running. They're not in use.
So the only time you throw an error is when go ahead.
When the firmware says, you've gone past,
the
or you're about ready to go past the limit, I'm going to go ahead and stop you 3 millimeters before, or whatever, right?
Yes.
So they're really cool in the fact that once you home your machine, it sets soft limits. Right?
Makes sense.
Whereas if you have limit switches, again, you really don't need to home your machine.
You're looking at a machine.
Okay.
You got a gantry that is hundreds of pounds.
Yes.
And you don't home that machine like you would our little hobby machine?
Yeah, you would. Like on a mill or an industrial CNC mill that has all the tool chains and everything. The problem there, they have limit switches. Now they'll home their machine because they need to understand where it's at. So for them, it's really a position. Where are you in space, so that I can figure out. But they have limit switches.
Right.
If they didn't, you would take the head of that machine and knock it off, and then you'd be out $60,000 or $80,000.
Yeah. That's why they never let me run one.
Yeah,
Okay.
I had an experience when I was new at John Deere where we wrote code that was not correct, and took a machine head right across a casting, and yeah, nobody was really happy about that.
Okay.
But
And
they
they
didn't
let you come back to work.
They didn't let me go.
Okay.
So yeah, but yeah, it
The
was
power
not
of
good. Yeah.
patience.
So your limits and home switches, they will not keep you from crashing into your material, but they
Right.
will keep you from going past the end of travel. So, if your machine doesn't home, then in reality, if all the other things are working correctly, then it's got to be a home switch issue. Something's not hitting right. So they have to be plugged into the correct axis, right? Because it's going to drive that Z up until it hits the Z home switch.
Right.
So you have to have it correct. But if you have a 3-axis machine, you would need 3 home switches, unless you have one of maybe and you can do this also with a gantry router. But for our gantry routers, we actually have 4 home switches, because we want to home each side of the gantry independently, right? And the reason we do that is so we make sure that gantry is square
Right.
to the X and Y, or so the X and Y axis make 90 degrees perfect. So if you're building your own CNC, definitely want to consider home switches. There's 2 types really that you can get, 2 types of switches. The mechanical ones, which will work just fine. You'd be surprised at how good they are in repeatability. The Hall effects or the touchless home switches, they will do just as well as far as the accuracy, but they don't have the mechanical wear. And so some of them have like a magnet, and other of them just if it passes metal. So you'll be able to use those type of switches as well. The other thing that you're going to need to know about switches is mechanical ones can be normally opened or normally closed as far as the way they're wired.
So what do you mean by that?
So
I mean,
when
guys that
Yeah.
understand electrical stuff.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So if a normally closed switch means that the contact is closed, right? So it's basically grounding out that circuit, and then as soon as your switch is pushed, it opens up that circuit, and therefore lets the 5 volts go through, or the whatever voltages that you have, and it triggers that switch. The normally open is the opposite. The circuit is normal. No, we just did normally close.
Oh, I thought you did open.
Now you confused me. The
Well,
normally
welcome
open is
to my world.
open, right? And then as soon as you push the button, it closes the contacts.
Yes.
The one thing that you need to be aware of is most, I believe, switches that are touchless are normally open. So there is no signal until the magnet or the metal it activates the switch, and then it sends the 5 volts back. But either way, what you're doing is you're sending a signal back, or causing a signal. The reason that we use normally closed when we had mechanical systems, because that's the way if a wire was broken and all of a sudden the circuit was opened, then it would not work, right? Because it would think that it was triggered, so you would see that on the screen. So normally closed is what most people use when they have mechanical switches, because if it's broke or it's jammed, it's going to show that. So
Okay.
anyway, so that's really kind of it. With switches, you have to hook them up to the right spot for the software, your firmware, and make sure that each axis has one. But other than that, then it should be pretty simple. If you've already got that step direction stuff down and all the other things, the switches should be simple.
And as always, if you've got any questions at all, you can get a hold of us at the help desk at bobcnc.com. And so until next time,
Yeah, till next time.
we'll see ya.